The moment Catherine Waverly saw the girl's necklace, her world stopped. 1 second she was lifting her wine glass, the next she was staring at the gold pendant hanging just below the girl's collarbone. A delicate charm, shaped like a crescent moon, etched with a single initial, L. Chase Waverly, 16, proudly introduced the girl he'd brought home. "Mom, Dad, this is Jader Lane." Jader smiled softly. Her voice stayed steady even as the room tightened. "It's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Waverly." Catherine didn't answer. Her eyes stayed locked on the necklace. Robert Waverly, seated at the head of the table, cleared his throat. "And how did you two meet?" "At the community center near Lincoln Park," Chase replied quickly. "She volunteers there, teaching coding to younger kids. That's where I've been helping out." "Amazing," Robert murmured, forcing a smile. Catherine finally blinked and set her glass down, untouched. "Excuse me," she said, rising slowly. Her voice had gone cold, almost brittle. "I'll be right back." She turned and walked out of the room stiffly, one hand reaching up, not for composure, but for her own necklace hidden beneath her blouse. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Catherine Waverly didn't stop until she reached the master suite. She shut the door, locked it, and opened the antique jewelry box on her dresser with trembling hands. Under pearls and diamonds sat a necklace almost identical to the one Jader wore. A gold crescent moon, etched with the same single letter, L. She hadn't seen that symbol in 18 years. Not once. If I'm wrong, she thought, I ruin my son's life. If I'm right, I already did. In the dining room, the silence pressed in on all of them. Jader took a small sip of water. Chase talked too fast, trying to fill the quiet. "She's into AI and robotics too, Mom. I mean, she's applying to Columbia next year. She got into their summer program." Robert raised an eyebrow. "Impressive. How old are you, Jader?" 18. I turned 19 in March." "And you've been coding for a while?" Hader nodded. "I've always loved solving puzzles." Aubert gave a small smile, but his eyes flickered again to her necklace. "That's a beautiful piece. Family heirloom?" Hader looked down. "Actually, no. I don't know where it came from." "You don't?" "I grew up in foster care. The necklace was the only thing found with me when I was a baby. My records list me as Hader Lane, but I don't know if Lane was my birth name or just something the system gave me." Robert's fork stopped midair. The table went quiet. He exchanged a glance with the empty doorway where Catherine had disappeared. Hader didn't notice. She was still staring down at the gold charm, completely unaware it had just opened a door no one in that house ever wanted to walk through again. Upstairs, Catherine stood at the bathroom sink, running cold water over her wrists. Her breath came shallow and uneven. She hadn't thought about that night in years, but the necklace dragged it back in 1 second. And now a girl had walked into her home wearing it. She gripped the counter, fighting to stay upright. Downstairs, Chase was completely unaware. He was too busy watching Hader as she mentioned a funny moment from class. One of the kids made a robot spin in circles. We had to unplug everything. Chase laughed too loudly. Robert smiled, but his mind raced. He had seen that necklace once, in a hospital corridor, years ago. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the hall. Catherine returned, calm and cold. She took her seat with a tight smile. "Sorry, just needed to check something." "Everything okay?" Chase asked. "Of course," she said, but then she turned to Hader and asked flatly, "Have you ever tried to find your biological parents?" Hader's face dropped. She hesitated. "I used to," she whispered, "but I stopped when someone warned me to let it go." The silence pressed in on all of them. "Someone warned you?" Chase repeated, leaning in. Hader nodded. "Yeah, about 3 years ago I filed a request for non-identifying records through the state. The next week I got a typed note in the mail. No return address, just one sentence. It used my full name." "What did it say?" Robert asked, his voice low. Jader glanced between them. It said, "Stop digging. Some things stay buried for a reason." Catherine's fingers tightened around the glass until her knuckles blanched. "And you just stopped?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "I was 15. It scared me." Jader looked away, embarrassed. I showed it to my caseworker and she told me to drop it. She said sometimes parents have good reasons to stay hidden. So I let it go. I told myself the past didn't matter. Chase reached for her hand under the table. It matters, he said softly. Robert cleared his throat. You said the necklace came with you as a baby. Do you still have any of the paperwork from the system? Jader blinked. Only a copy. Why? Can we see it? He asked. Catherine shot him a look, but then she turned back to Jader, her voice sharp. After that note, I don't trust later. Not anymore. I need to see it. Tonight. Chase frowned. Mom, why are we doing this now? What's going on? Catherine met his eyes. Because I've learned what later costs. Jader stood slowly. If we're doing this, we do it at my place. I'm not handing papers over in a stranger's car. An hour later, Chase pulled up outside Jader's small apartment on the south side. 1 hour ago, penthouse ceilings. Now, creaky floorboards. The building was quiet, mostly families. Catherine and Robert had insisted on coming. Catherine said she wanted clarity. Robert hadn't said anything at all. Jader apologized for the mess, even though her place was spotless. It's in here, she said, retrieving a slim manila folder from a fireproof box under her bed. It's not much, just intake notes and a faded medical report. She handed it to Catherine, who opened it with trembling fingers. The top page was a hospital report. Female infant, black, approximately 5 days old. Found abandoned near Lincoln Park, Chicago, wearing crescent moon necklace. No injuries. Cord recently cut, signs of recent birth. No witnesses. Catherine's breath caught. Jader's throat tightened. Beneath it was a social worker's note dated June 2007. Infant appeared healthy. Anonymous caller reported the location to emergency services. The report described the voice. Female, mid-30s, educated. Refused to give name. The caller said, "She's safer without me." Robert stepped back as if struck. Catherine sat down slowly on the edge of Jader's couch. She wasn't blinking. "Oh my God," she whispered. "That exact phrase. I remember saying it." Chase looked between them, confused. "Wait, what do you mean, Mom? What's going on?" Catherine didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the folder in her lap as if it had dragged a ghost out of her chest. Jader stood frozen, one hand gripping the side of her desk. "You recognize this, don't you?" Robert didn't look at Jader. He stared at his wife. Catherine finally spoke, her voice low and cracking. "That necklace, it's not just similar, it's the same. I had one just like it made years ago, before everything went quiet." "Before what?" Chase asked, panic climbing in his throat. Robert's voice was barely a whisper. "Before the baby." Jader's lips parted, stunned. "What baby?" Catherine stood up too fast. "Not like this. Not in front of Chase." Jader stepped back, her voice shaking. "I think I have the right to know." Catherine turned to her son. "Chase, there's a chance she's your sister." Heavy silence. "No," Jader whispered, stepping back like she'd been slapped. "That's not possible." But Catherine wasn't denying it. Robert sat down, burying his face in his hands. Chase just stood there, the floor tilting beneath him. "No," Chase said again, louder this time. "No, that can't be right. That's insane." Jader had backed into the corner of the room, arms crossed tight over her chest like she was holding herself together by force. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Catherine stayed silent, but her face said everything. She looked like she had aged a decade in 5 minutes. "I was 20, she said finally. "I was in college. I wasn't married yet. I wasn't ready. My parents threatened to disown me if I kept the baby. So I made the worst decision of my life." She looked at Jader now. "They told me you were going to a good family. I didn't even know where you ended up. But I couldn't bear the thought of you having nothing. So I left the necklace with you. It was all I had to give." Jader's voice was icy. "You abandoned me." "I hated myself every day for it." Chase turned to his mother, voice hollow. "And you never told me." Robert finally spoke, his voice brittle. "I found out 2 years after we married. She told me in tears. I promised never to bring it up again." "But she's not your daughter," Catherine whispered. "She's mine, but not ours." And then Robert said what no one else dared to. "We're getting a DNA test, today." The next morning was quiet. Jader didn't sleep. She sat on her bed, knees drawn to her chest, clutching the necklace she once thought was just a pretty charm. Her world had flipped in one evening. She didn't know who to trust, herself, least of all. A knock at her door startled her. It was Chase, alone. He looked like he hadn't slept either. He handed her a small envelope. "A private DNA lab. They'll come to you. I don't want this online. I don't want reporters." Jader stared at the envelope but didn't take it. "You still think I might be your sister?" she asked softly. "I don't know what to think," he admitted, "but I know I want the truth." "Whatever it is." She took the envelope. "They'll test you against both my mom and my dad," Chase added quietly, "just to be completely sure." Back at the Waverly penthouse, Catherine sat at the dining table, silent. Robert paced with his phone in hand. "She hates me," Catherine whispered. "I saw it in her eyes." "She has every right," Robert replied, "but that doesn't mean this ends in hate." A few hours later, the DNA technician came and went. 3 days crawled by. Jader barely ate. Chase typed messages he never sent. Catherine stayed inside. Robert slept on the couch. Then, on the third evening, a single email arrived in Jader's inbox. She opened it slowly, heart pounding. 99.9% probability of direct maternal relationship to Catherine Waverly. And below that, no paternal match to Robert Waverly. Chase read it twice. He looked at his mother like he didn't know her. Catherine stood alone on the rooftop garden of Waverly Tower, clutching the original necklace she'd hidden for nearly 2 decades. The DNA results had confirmed what she already knew deep down. But the lack of Robert's paternity changed everything. It meant the father wasn't Robert. It was someone from a life she'd buried. "I failed her twice," she whispered to the empty air. "Once when I gave her away, and again when I met her and saw nothing but shame." Behind her, footsteps approached. Jader appeared quietly. "You wanted to meet?" Jader said gently. "So I came." Catherine turned. Her voice cracked. "Thank you." They sat on a bench beneath the glass awning, the city humming quietly below. "I wasn't going to come," Jader admitted, "but I remembered what you asked me that first night, about the necklace." Catherine nodded. "I used to want answers," Jader said. "Now I think I just want peace." Catherine reached into her coat pocket and handed Jader a small velvet box. Inside was the twin necklace. "I had 2 made," she said, "one for me and one for the baby I thought I'd never see again." Jader stared at it, then looked at Catherine. "I don't need it to know who I am," she whispered, "but I'll wear it to remember who you chose to become." 3 months later, the Waverly Foundation quietly announced a new scholarship initiative for young women in foster care pursuing tech education. It was named the Jader Lane Initiative. At the official press launch, Catherine stood beside Jader, not as a benefactor, but as a mother, trying to show up the way she never had before. Chase spoke at the podium. "She's not my sister by blood," he said, "but I'd be proud if she was." The room responded warmly. Later that day, in a quiet corner of the Foundation's new mentorship wing, Jader helped a shy 12-year-old girl troubleshoot a broken circuit. Catherine watched from the hallway, her eyes wet but steady. Robert stood beside her. "She's not your mistake," he said quietly. "She is your second chance." Catherine didn't answer. She didn't need to. Jader wore both necklaces now, hers and the one Catherine had saved. Proof she survived. Proof she chose what came next. She hadn't just found a family. She had changed what family meant. Family isn't just blood. It's who shows up.